The morning air in downtown Los Angeles was sharp and cold, the kind that stings your skin and makes your breath visible in little clouds. The city was already alive, horns honking, people rushing to work, coffee carts steaming on the sidewalks. Among the chaos, a sleek black Mercedes rolled to a stop near a narrow alley behind a busy cafe. Inside sat Richard Cole, a man who looked like success itself, polished shoes, tailored suit, phone glued to his ear. He was a self-made millionaire, a man who had built his empire from nothing. But this morning, his expression was heavy with frustration. Another deal falling apart. Another person trying to take advantage of him. He ended the call abruptly, tossing his phone on the seat with a sigh. As he stepped out to get some air, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the faint odor of trash drifting from the alley. He was about to walk past when something caught his eye, a small figure, half hidden behind a dumpster. He squinted. It was a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, digging through a trash can with her bare hands. Her clothes were thin and torn, her hair tangled. Despite the dirt on her face, her eyes had a strange, quiet strength, the kind you don't often see in someone so young. Richard hesitated, unsure what to say. Then, his voice softened. Greater than, "Hey, what are you doing out here, sweetheart?" The girl startled and froze, clutching a crumpled sandwich wrapper. Greater than, I'm just looking for food," she whispered. "My mom's sick. She hasn't eaten." Something inside Richard cracked. He noticed her hands shaking, her lips pale from the cold. And then, he saw it. On her wrist, dangling loosely, was a small silver bracelet. It was old and worn, but unmistakable. His heart skipped a beat. He remembered that bracelet. He had bought it years ago, for his daughter, Emily, the day she turned 3. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Greater than, that bracelet, where did you get it? The little girl looked up, confused. Greater than, it was my mom's gift. She said, it used to be my dad's favorite thing. In that moment, Richard's world tilted. His pulse quickened. Could it be? The truth was standing right in front of him, and he wasn't ready for it. Richard stood frozen in the alley, his mind spinning. The sound of traffic faded away. All he could see was the little girl's face, her curious eyes, that silver bracelet catching the morning light. He swallowed hard, his chest tight. Greater than, what's your name? He asked softly. Greater than, Emily, she replied, smiling shyly. My mom says my dad used to call me his sunshine. The world seemed to stop. Emily. That name hit him like a wave of memories, bedtime stories, her laughter echoing in the halls, the day her mother left after their divorce. He'd spent years convincing himself they were happy somewhere far away. That lie now shattered before his eyes. Greater than, Emily, he said quietly, his voice trembling, can you take me to your mom? She nodded without hesitation and led him through narrow streets to an old, crumbling building at the edge of town. The steps creaked beneath their feet. Inside, the walls were stained, the air thick with the smell of dampness and sickness. On a thin mattress near the corner, a woman lay still, pale, coughing weakly. Richard's heart stopped. It was Lena, his ex-wife. When she looked up, her eyes widened in disbelief. Greater than, Richard, she whispered, her voice cracked and weak. He stepped closer, struggling to find words. Greater than, Lena, what happened? Why are you here? Why didn't you tell me? Tears gathered in her eyes as she tried to sit up. Greater than, I didn't want to ask for help, she said faintly. After we divorced, I lost my job. Things got worse. I told myself I could fix it, but I couldn't. I didn't want Emily to grow up thinking her dad was too busy to care. Richard's throat tightened. He looked around the room. No heat, no food, a few blankets piled in the corner. Shame washed over him. He had everything, luxury, success, power, yet here was his family, forgotten and broken. Emily rushed to her mother's side, hugging her tightly. Greater than, Mom, this man gave me food. He's really kind. Lena's tears fell. She looked at Richard and whispered the words that crushed him completely. Greater than, Emily, sweetheart, that kind man is your father. Silence filled the room, and for the first time in years, Richard's heart truly broke. The sky had turned a soft gray as the sun began to fade behind the Los Angeles skyline. Richard sat alone on a weathered park bench, his coat draped over his shoulders, his thoughts heavier than the evening air. Across from him, families laughed, Joggers passed by, and children chased pigeons, a world that suddenly felt distant, almost unreal. He stared blankly at the city lights flickering on one by one, like tiny reminders of everything he had missed. For years, he'd measured life by deals closed, profits earned, and headlines praising his success. But now, all that seemed meaningless compared to the image burned into his mind, his little girl searching through trash for food. He rubbed his temples, his hands trembling slightly. Greater than, how could I let this happen? He murmured under his breath. Memories began to pour in, Emily's laughter the day she took her first steps, the way she used to cling to his leg before he left for work, the birthday parties he missed because of important meetings. Every excuse he ever made came back like an echo of failure. He had built skyscrapers, companies, and fortunes, but in doing so, he had let the foundation of his own family crumble. The thought tore through him like glass. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through pictures of business awards and luxury vacations, but not a single photo of Emily. Not one. The realization hit hard, and tears finally broke free. He wasn't crying for what he'd lost in money or power, he was crying for what he'd thrown away without even noticing. A small boy ran past, holding his father's hand and laughing. Richard watched them disappear down the path, and his voice cracked as he whispered. Greater than, that should have been us. For the first time in decades, Richard Cole, the man known for control, precision, and power, felt completely powerless. He stood up slowly, determination replacing despair. Greater than, no more running, he said quietly to himself. Not this time. With that, he turned toward the hospital where Lena and Emily were staying. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about meetings or money, only about making things right. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Richard stood by the hospital window, watching the light spill across the floor. It felt symbolic, as if life was giving him one more chance to make things right. Lena was resting in a hospital bed, her face pale but peaceful. Machines beeped softly beside her. Doctors had told him she was weak but recovering, if she received proper care and nutrition. For the first time in years, Richard felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. He turned and saw Emily sitting quietly on a chair, her small hands holding a stuffed bunny that looked worn and loved. She looked up at him with those same blue eyes he once saw in the mirror. Greater than, is Mommy going to be okay? She asked softly. Richard knelt beside her, his voice gentle. Greater than, yes, sweetheart. She's going to be just fine. I promise. Over the next few days, Richard was a man transformed. The same determination that once built his empire now went into rebuilding his family. He met with doctors, arranged private care, and made sure Lena had everything she needed. He didn't just pay the bills, he was present. When Emily tugged at his sleeve, he didn't brush her off. He listened. He laughed. He learned to make her favorite peanut butter sandwiches, even though he burned the first two. One afternoon, Richard took Emily shopping for new clothes. Her eyes sparkled as she twirled in a new yellow dress. For the first time, her laughter filled the space between them, pure and innocent. Back at the hospital, Lena watched from her bed as Richard and Emily played together. A tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of seeing her daughter happy, and her husband changed. A few weeks later, when Lena was strong enough to walk again, Richard brought them both to a small, cozy house outside the city. Fresh flowers filled the kitchen. Warm light poured through the windows. That night, Emily handed Richard a crayon drawing, a smiling family holding hands under a bright sun. Greater than, I drew us happy again, she said. Richard's throat tightened. He hugged her close and whispered. Greater than, you didn't just draw it, sweetheart, you made it real. Months passed, and the chill of winter gave way to the warmth of spring. The small white house Richard bought for his family now stood surrounded by blooming tulips and the soft hum of life. The yard, once empty, was alive with laughter. Richard knelt in the grass beside a tiny garden bed, his hands dirty with soil. Emily giggled as she helped him plant bright yellow marigolds. She wore her favorite straw hat, the one that kept slipping over her eyes. Greater than, you know, Richard said, smiling, these flowers are just like us. Emily looked up curiously. Greater than, how? Greater than, they needed care, sunshine, and time to grow. Just like our family did. She grinned and threw her arms around him, her small voice muffled against his chest. Greater than, I love you, Daddy. The words struck his heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. For years, he had chased success, thinking love could wait. But in that moment, holding his daughter close, he realized he finally had everything he'd ever wanted. From the porch, Lena watched them with a gentle smile. She looked healthier now, her color returned, her spirit lighter. The pain of the past had softened into gratitude. Later that evening, the three of them sat around the dinner table, the smell of home-cooked food filling the room. It wasn't luxury or extravagance, just peace, warmth, and love. Richard looked at the two people who had changed his life and felt tears prick his eyes. He cleared his throat. Greater than, you both gave me something no amount of money ever could, a second chance. Lena reached across the table and held his hand. Greater than, you earned it, Richard. You came home. In the weeks that followed, Richard launched a new project, a charity foundation named Emily's Hope. Its mission was simple, to help struggling families get back on their feet, to make sure no child ever had to dig through trash for a meal again. The story of the once cold millionaire who found redemption spread quietly, inspiring thousands. As the sun set behind their home, Richard lifted Emily into his arms. Greater than, see that, sweetheart, he said, pointing at the horizon. That's what a new beginning looks like. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in his life, Richard Cole felt truly rich, not in wealth, but in love. Dash dash dash. Dash dash dash.